Everything Sequel is brought to you by Slater's 50/50 and Brew Bar.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the 1990 singles edition, Young Guns 2. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. With me is my fantastic partner, Mr. Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. What do you got for me, Tom?
I'd rather drink turpentine and piss on a brush fire.
It's my favorite line in the whole movie. I'm glad you brought it up right away.
While a close second was, I am New Mexico and you are dead.
I knew you would never say, yoo-hoo, I'll make you famous.
Is that a line in this movie?
Twice.
Oh, fuck's
3
sake.
times, maybe.
I have issues.
Today, we are talking about the 1990 sequel to the 1988 film, Young Guns. This movie is directed by Jeff Murphy, Tom, who also directed Free Jack.
Oh, God! Do you know what happened when you said Free Jack? Let me just, because you listeners can't see inside my mind, but this is what happened. A giant Mick Jagger
Yeah.
loomed into my consciousness for a second and then disappeared when you said Free Jack.
Perfect. Because that's basically what Free Jack is about.
It's a traumatic movie for the amount of Mick Jagger holograms that appear in that movie.
No, I do not disagree.
Of course he directed Free Jack. Of course he directed Free Jack.
He also directed a movie we will talk about at some point, I'm sure, Under Siege 2, Dark Territory.
Did he not do Under Siege?
No, that's an Andrew Davis movie.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, that's what he did before...
The Fugitive?
I think before he got The Fugitive, yeah.
That makes sense.
That's why the first movie's good.
It is. Under Siege is great. I have not seen Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, but we will get there.
Oh, you are in for a treat, my friend. All right, so we talked in the last podcast about Gremlins 2, The New Batch, which had like a budget of $50 million, but only made, I think, $41 million or something like that. This movie made $44 million on a budget of $20 million. So clearly it's better, right?
Well, clearly people didn't miss Charlie Sheen.
Right.
I did, but clearly the public at large did not.
You missed Charlie Sheen?
Oh my God, yes. I don't know. There's 2 Estevez is good, one not good.
See, I disagree. I think in these 2 movies, Young Guns and Young Guns 2, I don't know that Emilio Estevez is ever more fully immersed in a character than he is with this character.
Except that the character he's playing, at least in the contemporary parts of the film, is Grandpa Simpson. Think about it. He's the same voice, same look, same glasses. He's telling a story that goes nowhere and is probably not true.
Okay, this is one of my first questions for you. I think I already have my answer. How do you feel about the voiceover in this movie?
Large swathes of this movie are difficult to understand because the voiceover is the quietest in cinematic history. I kept turning up my volume to try and hear what the fuck he was saying. And, this idea that you get quieter as you get older is very strange acting
Nonsense.
choice. Especially for a voiceover.
I'll say this, though. I thought that makeup looked fucking great.
Yeah, it did. It was excellent.
Yeah.
The voiceover is problematic for a number of reasons, but the performance of it is, I think, particularly off-putting. I like the quietness of it underlines the ramblingness of it to a point where I just want to go to sleep.
Well, I also think it's funny because they abandon it at some point. I couldn't really pinpoint when they abandoned it.
And then it comes in very abruptly at some moments, to the point where, wait a minute, is that Grandpa Simpson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did
But
not.
at a
this
certain
movie
point,
has
I
a
don't
whole
think you hear it
problem
all
with,
the way
like,
until the end.
time and place. So they clearly, it's like, oh shit, we forgot to put the time and date stuff up. Let's just put it up in like 2 scenes time.
I think they just assume they do that with clothing and cars.
Well, no, but the first flashback
They're like
get,
Bradley Whitford. Bradley Whitford has got, his 1950s clothes on and his 1950s car. People don't know it's the 50s.
Yeah, and to give the film its credit, I did like that. It opens, as the classic. It's the classic Western opening: the Lone Rider, the open plain, the hazy skies, spaghetti Western style, albeit played by John Bon Jovi music. And then immediately we see a 1950s car. That's good. I like that, and that, for good or bad, that tension between the classic and the contemporary is what this movie is based on.
Yeah.
For good and ill, mainly ill.
Well, and one of my very first notes for this movie was the first movie seemed very concerned about looking and feeling like a Western. And to your point, what you just said, this movie does not feel like it's concerned with that.
Well, I didn't know that Pat Garrett had a mullet. I didn't know that he had a mullet that his beard grew into to create what I can only describe as a bear mullet. A burrullet. Were I tweeting about that, I would use the hashtag 80s problems.
True.
Yeah, I mean...
But you know what's strange?
It's difficult. I don't know. It's difficult to suspend belief, but you make a good suspend disbelief about this not being the 80s, largely because of the kinds of actors and their looks in this movie.
Right.
But you raise a good point, which is that maybe the film is trying to shy away from some of the kind of creakier aspects of the Western that might off-put young audiences.
Well, and what's funny to me is that...
It is called Young Guns, for instance.
Yeah, right. In its attempt to do that, it feels more accessible than the first movie.
I disagree.
Now, what I mean is to a general movie-going audience, though.
But I think it just make... I don't agree with that either. I think it will make... It's very off-putting. I think they would have done better trying to reinvent the Western by pointing out how exciting everything is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think substituting it with a legal drama and gunfighters who don't want to be gunfighters anymore is going to interest anyone. And people going around saying, well, the frontier isn't the frontier it used to be. It's like, I just want to see people shooting each other. And I'm sure that's what kids want to see. And I don't want to get a lecture every time someone shoots each other.
Well, now, so I think what I'm talking about is the look of the movie.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by accessible.
Okay.
The first movie has that sort of dulled color tone.
All right.
Shots further away. You got lots of close-ups in this movie. The sort of oversaturated color feeling.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Bare ass. So I felt like it was. I mean, we're talking about a director who did Free Jack and another sequel, Under Siege 2, and to me it was, they got what they paid for in that. And so I think it was more accessible in that way, and how they marketed it and how they want, you got John Bon Jovi singing a contemporary song, but making it,
Well, that's the other weird thing, is that when we go into the past, the movie sounds more like music. The music sounds more like music from the 80s than it does when we're in the present.
But I like that music too.
You think that's a deliberate choice, or you think it's just like John Bon Jovi can't maintain period non-specific music for too long? Like he's got to throw a solo in there.
Yeah, it really is hard to say. But I made a note that one of the first, when you see when brushy Bill Roberts starts explaining who he is to Bradley Whitford, and you have that above sort of the sloping plains of New Mexico shot watching horses, and the music comes in, I wrote a note that said, "Ooh, I like that music." But I also wrote notes later on where I said the music's not working anymore. So
you broke up with the music in the course of the movie.
Yeah,
basically.
but I also kind of
we need you about halfway through. Like we need to
we have to talk. But then towards the end of the movie, again, I thought, okay, it's working for me again. So
interesting.
I don't know.
I mean, talk about dating a movie.
Yeah.
We talked about this with Gremlins, and John Bon Jovi is the Hulk Hogan of this movie in terms of carbon dating it as a movie
for
from
sure.
1990.
Absolutely. So, but let me ask you this: talking about, not talking about what works and what doesn't, but I was genuinely baffled with the list of people in this movie that we know. The talent in this movie. I mean, it's...
Oh, yeah. That's very distracting, isn't it?
It's endless.
It's...
I mean, you got James, put aside that you have Emilio Estevez and Kiefer Sutherland and Lou Diamond Phillips, and now you add Christian Slater, and you add William Peterson, and I'm a big William Peterson fan.
Me too. I think he does a great job here.
And I really like it. I love him in this movie. But you have Alan Ruck, and you have James Coburn, and you have Balthazar Getty, and Viggo Mortensen, and Bradley Whitford, Scott Wilson from The Walking Dead fame. The number of people where you go, oh man, that person was in this movie. I forgot.
Oh, 100%. At times, to say it's the saving grace of the movie is really an understatement. When James Coburn turned up in this movie, I have never breathed a deeper sigh of relief in my life. And he delivered. In those few minutes he is on screen, he delivered. I mean, obviously, I like the callback to movie history in that he was Pat Garrett in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kids. And
right, in Pat Garrett and Billy, yeah.
And he's in here he's the guy who turned.
And he also has the same line.
Pat Garrett as a sheriff. So that's there's anyway.
And he has like a new version of the same line about taking the money and stuffing it up your ass and lighting it on fire.
Yeah, and there's a moment where one Pat Garrett leaves and another comes on screen. It's nicely done. And he just kills it for those few moments he's on screen. You can suspend disbelief that you're in a really good Western for a few minutes. And I got that kind of relief from a few of the actors on screen. Scott Wilson, I always love to see.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland, I think is, this is before we knew what he was capable of, I think. This is before we knew he was capable of a kind of Jack Bauer sort of character. But to me, he's like it helps that he's the one who's kind of somehow grown from what he was in the original movie, and we're seeing him question and criticize.
He's a reluctant anti-hero.
But I enjoyed him talking back to the Billy the Kid when he says, you drove a 15-year-old into his grave. That was a great acting moment.
Right. Well, so we talked in the introductory episode, the mini-sode rather, and I talked about wrestling with this movie, and I talked about we were talking about the difference between a movie and a film. Is there a difference between those two things? Because, look, this isn't a good movie.
Didn't you say it was a good movie?
I did. So,
I don't know how to argue for or against that.
You just shut your mouth for a second and listen up. This is not a good movie, but it's a good movie. There's no explanation.
Oh, well, that clears it up.
Yeah. There's, I think more than anything that this movie has going for it, which I suspect you're going to actually disagree with, but I think most of the performances in this movie are good, and that makes the movie engaging and therefore makes the movie good. But I also find myself constantly lamenting as I watch this movie the missed opportunities.
I don't think the performances are bad by any means. I don't think, and we've seen this before with another stakeout. I don't think asking Emilio Estevez to carry a movie is generally a good idea. And I would have liked less of the movie to rest so much on his shoulders. But
I think I disagree with you because I like his performance in this movie. I wish he was given a little more to do. Now, whether or not he could have parlayed being given more into doing more, we'll never know. But like I said before, I think he's fully immersed in this character. I think he totally gets William H. Bonney. I think he is. When I think of Billy the Kid, I now think of Emilio Estevez.
I still think of Paul Newman, and I don't think that's going to change. But I agree. I definitely agree with the fact it's what they're given to do that is the problem. Lou Diamond Phillips is a great example of that because, when you think about this Native American character, this is like a breakthrough role, both actor and character. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what he's given to do in this movie, and I don't remember what he had to do in the first film, he's just there to dispense wisdom.
Yeah, he's there for next to nothing.
Which is, we now look back and say, there's a kind of whole history of Native American characters who do nothing but talk in like aphorisms. And that's kind of what it is here. And then he dies and turns into the TriStar logo.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
But I don't hold that against Lou Diamond Phillips. And
no.
Keith Sutherland, I think, has more
character
development written into his therapy, so he's riffing on that, and he does well with that. Some great cameos in the movie, but it doesn't gel at all for me. But it's pretty inoffensive. I didn't begrudge spending.
At the end of the movie, I don't think the thought in my head isn't that was a waste of my time. I always think I enjoyed that.
I resented the fact that the film was always telling me that I shouldn't be enjoying this film because it's a Western. I feel like that was a big mistake, that it's constantly like saying, well, violence is wrong and racism is wrong, and it's like, yeah, but then don't do a Western.
Right.
Because those are the two big things I want in a Western, is racism and violence. So I was a little bit like, stop telling me that violence is wrong and that kids are gonna, it's like, or at least do it better than this, Well, that'll be my main point. We're gonna take a break, and then I want to talk about where I think they could have gone. We'll talk about that when we come back, and stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back. Look, people, we're living in strange times. We know that, don't we? Of course we do. People don't even know what to do with themselves. We're getting stir crazy. Well, get outside and get yourself some great food, I say. You need to go to Slater's 50/50 in Point Loma's Liberty Station. It's time to treat yourself to booze, to beer, to burgers, and more. They have their full menu, people. Their full menu, I say. How many restaurants do you know that are doing that?
Most places are doing a quarter of their menu probably. Some might be doing a half. Maybe a few have got 3/4 of a menu. But Slater's 50/50 has their full menu, including their signature 50/50 patty. It's half ground beef. It's half ground bacon. It's 100% delicious. What more could you possibly ask? Worried about social distancing? Well, it is in place, people. Tables are separated and the staff will always be seen wearing masks. You're out of excuses. Get off your keister and come on down to Liberty Station's own Slater's 50/50. Indoor dining available. Outdoor dining available. Bring the family. Bring your dog. Come enjoy the normal again. Good day to you. I said good day. And we're back. We are here. Tom and I are talking about the 1990 Young Guns 2 sequel, directed by Jeff Murphy. Tom, when we left, we were talking about what works, what doesn't work. I think generally we both like the actors, but we wish they had more to do.
Yeah, that's fair.
And to me, I think it's really fascinating. The fascinating thing to me about this movie is there are things in the movie at play that I think are great, but are not explored enough. So to me, this movie is mostly about betrayal. But there's not enough of that.
One would think, given what happens in it, yes.
Right. So you have this idea of Garrett betraying Billy the Kid. It's problematic, however, that in real life they did not know each other that well. They never rode together. They never were criminals together. That's all invented for the sake of the movie. But I can get on board with that if you take the next step. And it's alluded to in the movie, but there's not enough character arc for Billy the Kid because he is betraying everybody in his gang for the sake of his own name and for the sake of staying in New Mexico. All of that is really interesting to me. And you even have great moments where Kiefer Sutherland does take a gun, a rifle, and points it right in his face and does state directly that this is all just for you. But there's something in the writing and there's something in the directing where you could have focused on that more, and I think this would have been a far more interesting movie.
Yeah, and I think there's also there's racial tension between Christian Slater and Lou Diamond Phillips. I think, and none of this goes anywhere. And I think the big problem is, like, you said it, it's this lack of focus. They basically, the fact that two members of the gang are fighting is somewhat undercut by the fact that they're always all fighting with each other with zero explanation as to why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the moments where I was like, have these kind of character dynamics already been set up in the first movie, and this is why I'm missing why they're fighting each other right now?
Right.
And possibly not. Likewise, what is actually a good moment in the film for different reasons when a lynch mob turns up that is Billy the Kid in disguise.
Right.
I've got a lot to say about the lynch mobs in these movies. I have a lot of questions. They're wearing what look like kind of proto-clan hoods.
Yeah.
So making, the lynching as a racial thing. That's interesting.
But it could also be first mask of not Michael Myers, but Jason Voorhees. Could be that, Tom.
The potato sack that he wears for a whole movie.
There you go.
We should replace that with something. How about a hockey mask?
Something less shitty.
Something that we won't instantly replace because it's wrong. Yeah, and so I thought, that's making a thing. And then the fact that it's Billy the Kid under there, it's like, well, now I don't know what the point was. Likewise, later on, and this is not related, I just wanted to bring it up. Later in the movie, the lynch mob are dressed like the Claude Rains as the Invisible Man. And I'm like, was there historical research for this, or did they just make it up? I spent most of the movie thinking those exact two questions. In terms of missed opportunities, this movie has the most interesting afterword I have ever seen. What they tell us happens to these characters after the movie is over sounds fucking great.
Yeah.
It passes off in a tiny piece of text that lasts 2 seconds on screen. That the Bradley Whitford character eventually appealed for Billy the Kid's pardon, if this guy really is Billy the Kid, which is another mystery that I was assuming this movie would answer. And then it says, no, we don't really know, which is not good enough.
He was discounted, but maybe. In fact, Tom, I have a note that says, I don't know when it was, maybe it was around 19... Anyway, they found 2 experts that are experts at facial recognition, and they took photos of Billy the Kid and Brushy Bill Roberts and said that Brushy Bill Roberts was a 93% match.
See, that's interesting.
For William H. Bonney.
That's interesting. And then it says, it just passes off as if this is too interesting for this movie, that he died a few months later
In Texas.
And
as he's walking away, I think to myself, how the fuck did that old man get to Texas?
I mean, I don't know if Oliver Stone saw this movie, but like he'd be like, cover up, conspiracy. I don't care that he's been discredited. I made a whole movie about Jim Garrison, and he talked shit. So I was just like, oh, I'd love it if all of this was the movie. One of the most underdeveloped things for me, which is one of the most interesting aspects, and Clint Eastwood proved it in Unforgiven 2 years later, was they start with this subplot about Pat Garrett recording his experiences through a journalist friend, which is exactly what happens in Unforgiven.
Right.
Except that in Unforgiven, they talk about the differences between Western mythology, self-aggrandizing mythology, and real history.
Correct.
But here they don't make that distinction.
And actual
nor do
history,
they tell us anything except at one point William Peterson leans over and says, what I presume, having not checked, is a line from the book, and says, like, write that down. It's like, that's not how this works, okay? That's not how writing a book works. It's like, well, I'm just going to write down what he says and then put ands and ifs between it. I mean, it's not how it works. So that's really underdeveloped, and it's all for the sake of a joke about him taking a shit every few hours.
Right. Which is, by the way, the line I thought you'd say. I thought you'd say, I need a moment.
What is it? I mean, we've already watched Back to the Future 3, which is set in a similar historical period. And there's a lot of shit and piss
and
jokes
came out the same
in
year.
Westerns in 1990.
Yeah.
I don't know. This was a thing the audiences love to see, apparently. Horse shit and people shit.
Well, and 2 years later, for Unforgiven, one guy gets killed on the shitter. So...
Well, that's right. I thought that's where we were going in the outhouse sequence, but it's just Billy the Kid hijinks.
Yeah, he's just being sassy.
You're a little scamp.
I also have a note here when Billy the Kid kills Bob with the shotgun filled with 18 dimes. And he says, hello, Bob. Goodbye, Bob. Best $1.80 I ever spent. I don't know about the latter part, but apparently the hello, Bob is historically accurate. There are different accounts that maybe he said something else, but most accounts say he did say hello, Bob, and then shot Bob.
I mean, I'm all with the project of, like, rewriting Western history and reclaiming forgotten people in that history, which is, a noble project that this movie at least starts.
Yeah.
But if this movie's so historically accurate, then why is John Fusco getting character credit for the characters?
Right.
And why at the end of the movie is that fictional disclaimer still there?
True.
Like it's like is your history really that good? If it was that good, wouldn't you need to have the
that's one of my notes for this movie.
People living or dead. I don't
know.
I don't know how that works.
That's one of my notes
for this movie. It was a bit of a red flag.
Is what I find interesting about this movie is, Young Guns, the first movie ends I think is it like text written over the screen? But they kind of explain what happens to Billy the Kid, even though it doesn't end with him getting shot.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
known.
So this is a sequel in version.
Yeah, so it makes it feel like that this movie's unnecessary, and there's a lot of things that are that are not true. Doc Skurlock and Chavez, they both lived through this in real life. They died as old men in the late 20s, I think.
So okay, a couple of things here. So they've got that framework of, it's kind of like the Big Fish idea. It's
Right, yeah.
he's telling a story that may or may not be true, so we can say whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
Added to that is, and this makes me like the film more, not enough to say it's a good movie, but that they're going against the grain of Young Guns.
Yeah.
Like what Young Guns said happens to the character. They flip that on its head in the first few moments of this movie. Am I right in thinking that?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think those two things are, well, not the Big Fish thing, but I guess it gives them deniability to be like, well, he was just talking bullshit, or all this stuff is real. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
No, it makes it more interesting. It's more interesting than I thought it was.
I'll tell you what is interesting.
20 minutes ago.
I'll tell you what's interesting to me is that whenever these characters get in trouble, and they're spending a good portion of this movie apparently trying to get to Mexico along the
old Mexico.
Old Mexico along the broken, is it Blackbird Trail?
The Blackbird Trail, yeah.
But they keep
Which
ending.
is a myth.
Right, but they keep ending up at the same. Is it Fort Sumter? They keep going back to that same fort where they know everybody knows that they will be there. Stop going there.
I mean, it takes 30 whole minutes, right? So this another kind of sequel. This is the getting the band back together sequel.
Yes, right.
Right. They all start off. They're all in separate
Different places.
We have to bring them together. 30 minutes into the movie, the gang is reunited. So that's already a big problem. In that it takes us 30 minutes
from a narrative standpoint, yeah.
The fact that when we get there, there's no clear sense of where they're going or what they're doing just compounds that. It's like we've wasted 30 minutes and we're still not really. Like you said, this is a pursuit movie where it's really easy for the person pursuing them to find them.
Exactly.
They're not really going anywhere.
Right.
I don't know, but then I don't know if that is like another. They just fudged, trying to make that interesting and saying, "Oh well, Mexico is the place, is this utopia that we can escape to, but it doesn't really exist, and the Western maps are all bullshit." I don't know if that's the point they're making. Mm-hmm. Could be, but it doesn't come across strongly enough.
Yeah,
as it would later in Unforgiven, where it's like every myth is egregious bullshit.
Yeah, it's just complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Well,
Will Money can't even separate pigs.
Yeah, right.
You keep those hogs separated.
That's a great Clint.
Can you imagine what the studio thought? It's like, yeah, Clint Eastwood. I know it's not the movie we're talking about, but I want to talk about it anyway. It's like, yeah, Clint Eastwood, great. Clint Eastwood Western. He's doing what for the first 20 minutes of the movie? Separating pigs. Okay, just that. Nothing else. It's like, he's chopping a little wood. But not in a cool way.
Well, he's also pulling out shotguns and pistols and trying to shoot cans, but he misses them. Like, you imagine them, he explains, well, he's also going to pull out shotguns and pistols and start, practicing.
Yeah.
He's going to be shooting cans. And they're like, oh, that sounds great. Well, he's going to miss them, though.
He's going to miss them. It's like, does he ever get good at gunfighting? Not really. No, he's had his day.
Not until he gets drunk.
He's had his day. His sidekick is blind, and Morgan Freeman's wasted.
All right. We're veering a little off course, which doesn't bode well for Young Guns, too. I might have to change my mind
that's
here.
Old Guns we're talking about.
Yeah, right. We're going to take another break. And when we come back, we'll try to stay on topic, everybody, and we'll continue talking about Young Guns 2. And we'll try to not veer off onto the Unforgiven track of land.
Let's talk about Rio Bravo.
Stay tuned. We'll be back after this.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
We're back. Tom and I were just discussing. I was saying I'm talking myself out of this being a good movie, and he said, you're almost talking me into this being a good movie.
We save the best conversations for when we're not recording.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're starting to meet in the middle, and I mean, it's a middle-of-the-road movie. You could sort of fall on either side of the debate, I think.
It is. It's one of those classic, it's not good, it's not bad. It's somewhere in between. And if you like these young actors, then you'll probably like the movie. If you like Westerns, you'll probably like the movie.
Let's not go crazy. I like Westerns. I don't like this movie.
But you almost do, based on my argument.
If you've only seen, The Quick and the Dead, you'll probably like this movie. That's not a slight against Quick and the Dead, but, if you have a superficial understanding of what a Western is, then this is going to look like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance to you.
I was just going to say, are you telling me that we're already veering off on other movies again.
How many Westerns can I reference?
Damn it.
That are
Bring
not
it back.
Young Guns
Bring
2?
it back. Bring it back. Shut the fuck up. We're actually talking about Young Guns 2. Oh, my God. All right. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
One thing that I find really interesting about this movie is it has, in kind of bad movie form,
Yeah.
it has this thing throughout it where everybody knows everybody in this movie.
You're so right. You are so right.
They all call each other by their first names. They all know the whore who runs the whorehouse with red hair, Jane. They all know James Coburn,
You're dead on about that, and it's definitely a bad movie thing. It's also a sequel thing. It's indicating, sometimes erroneously, to an audience who has not seen the original movie that these characters know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And often they don't. I mean, we had this with... I spent the whole of another 48 hours thinking that...
Right, yeah.
That two separate characters who were not in the original movie were prominently featured. We started talking about Jane, the character of Jane.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that it was like over an hour into the movie that we saw really the first significant female character.
I made the same note that we do not see a woman in this movie, and she's really the only woman.
She is, yeah.
In the whole movie.
Essentially, yeah.
But this movie is without females, essentially. And I wrote a note that said, man, what a dick show this movie is.
And there's a couple of things about that. The first is that also, like, the first African American turns up in the same scene. So Jeff Murphy's probably like, let's just do it all. Let's do all the minority shit in one scene.
Right, yeah.
I haven't got time for this shit. You know, Mick Jagger keeps calling me. I'm busy.
I'm in development for another movie. I gotta
Yes.
I'm working on getting Mick.
I want to be a hologram. Yeah, so that was the thing. And then the thing is, like, not only have we not seen a woman yet, but within a scene, she's completely naked.
Yeah.
So how do you have one woman in the movie and also nudity? Also, well, we've already talked a little about the afterword for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Directly prior to that is, and this has got to be a red flag, whatever for any kind of movie. We have a montage recap of the movie we've just seen. Not Young Guns.
Yeah, right.
Not Young Guns and Young Guns 2, just Young Guns 2. In which one of the highlights of the movie in this highlight reel is her naked again.
Yeah.
So, in some way, I mean, it is unnervingly efficient. Because it's going, you know, we've got our woman, we've got our nudity, we've got our diversity, and we've done it all in the same scene.
It's
morally abhorrent, but
right. I was just gonna say it's.
But you know,
it's problematic. It's crafty, morally abhorrent.
Yeah,
I don't think this is a word, but it's craftily morally abhorrent.
Yeah, so that is strange,
to say the least. Like I said, like
what do you think? Is it? Here's a question for you: is it a worse crime to repeat material from a prior film in a sequel,
okay,
or to recap your own movie? Like, what is worse?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Like,
you know,
what's the bigger crime cinematically?
Right. I would say going back to the prior movie. That bothers me more.
That's my feeling too.
Yeah.
But there is something, you know, is it just because they didn't want to confuse people?
I don't know.
They were like, if they saw Charlie Sheen, they'd be like, hey, where's Charlie Sheen? That's right, Charlie Sheen isn't in this movie. And we don't have Jack Palance.
Why
and we
are
don't
you showing Charlie Sheen? He wasn't in this movie.
Who's the other? There's another big actor, isn't there, that's missing? There's a couple of them.
Well, you Terrence Stamp, Jack Palance.
Terrence Stamp.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's at stake, but I was getting the...
But there's something in this series because, you know, the guys who die at the end of the first Young Guns, in real life, they didn't actually die.
Yeah.
Skurlock and Chavez die in this movie. They didn't die until they were old men in real life. I mean, you know, they take lots of liberties. And if, you know, like you said earlier, if it's in the purpose of doing something more interesting with your sequel, then, hey, great. But it reveals itself to be, I don't know, I was going to say stupid, but so when you have those, this is what happened to Arkansas Dave Rudabaugh moment at the end of the movie where they're recapping, I find myself saying, oh, what happened to Doc? Oh, that's right, he's dead. What happened to Chavez? Oh, that's right, he's dead. So you won't have one of these great little frozen moments in time from the movie about the characters you want to have them for.
That's entirely true. That's entirely accurate.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, it's making it look as if we should have been focusing on those characters because they seem so interesting.
Yeah, they're more interesting.
They've got more of a life around them.
Or, well, at least Skurlock does. We spoke to Chavez and the lack of him being given anything to do in this movie, which is regrettable.
I mean, we're talking about how the movie winds up. Did you get the sense that the kind of shootout happened too early in this movie? The scene in which everyone gets
in the little abandoned hut.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, you mentioned Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in a previous episode, and I was like, this feels like the ending of that.
Right.
But the movie goes on for about another 20 minutes.
And is completely less satisfying. And that's one of the problems I have with this movie is we were talking earlier about the missed opportunities, and I think there was something really interesting within the idea of the line, "I shall finish the game." Because if you put that onto Billy the Kid, that he considers all of this a game at the cost of killing his friends,
yeah,
he would become a far more interesting character.
And
if that's the moment where he's willing to sacrifice everyone to escape himself, that would have been more interesting.
Now, the way you're explaining that to me now is both interesting and not clear in the movie.
Right. That's my problem. These ideas are present in the movie, but they're never fully taken on. They're never come to fruition in a way that's satisfying.
Well, they certainly say "I shall finish the game" many, many times.
Many times, sure.
But I don't think I made a note of it, but I was like, what is this game they keep talking about? Did they start playing a game of chess in the first movie, and this is the continuation? Like, what are they talking about?
No, it's just that sort of parable, the little story that Billy the Kid tells.
Right,
Doc Skurlock,
But I don't know what it meant in the context
and
of
the
movie.
third
The way
man
you
says,
explained it
"I
is
shall
brilliant,
finish the game." Right. That's what I want for this movie. And so I always do lament that the movie didn't go to these places. And yet, when I finish it, I forgive it for it and think, I had a good time. I don't know if there's anything left for me to say on the subject of Young Guns 2.
I agree with it apart from the last part.
Sorry?
I agree with you apart from the last part.
Right, clearly.
I didn't have a good time. Does the first movie explain why they broke up?
I don't remember.
No.
I think there's like a little script at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I could be completely wrong.
I mean,
kind of explaining what happens after.
I don't want to go too far back, but as an early point in the movie, I was like, is this going to be a courtroom drama?
Right.
Because we have a lot of legalese very early on. We're talking about state's evidence and testifying, which I don't even think were terms back then.
I didn't give that
evidence.
That did not.
Witness
whether or not they were actually
system.
terms did not enter my consciousness. But what I also see, this is one of those things that bothers me because I think within that there's an interesting idea, in the sense of Billy the Kid, no matter how much terrible shit he's done, if for the character in his mind, if he agreed to testify against the man who murdered his boss and the man who first treated him like a real human being, there's something interesting in that.
Yeah, and the fact that both he and Pat Garrett at different times of the movie are on both sides of the law.
Yeah.
Is nice, but I mean, this was a thing in that the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as they went on. There were so many deals going on between people. At one point, I was just like,
right, and backstabbing and
it's like this is like being this is like a lawyers negotiating with each other.
Right.
And it kind of felt a little. I mean, it opened up more than I'm grateful. It opened up more than I thought it would. I thought we were actually going to go into a courtroom, because most of the first half of the movie is indoors, which is worrying for a Western.
True.
So I'm glad it moved away from that. I wasn't happy about falling down the hill in slow motion to a Bon Jovi guitar
Really
solo.
really bad in the sense of letting the audience know how that happens, and it's not directed well.
Yeah, it's like all the bad things of this movie and of the 80s as a decade
Yeah.
in a minute of screen time. Which, again, efficient.
Specifically speaking to the horses, if you take your horse over the side of a cliff and you're thrown from your horse, like, show me at least one person who breaks his arm or leg.
Well, it's the A-Team, the the kind of the A-Team paradox of you get up and dust yourself off.
And go. The only good part to me in that whole sequence is when Pat Garrett shows up and says, "Jesus Christ, even their horses are crazy."
Yeah.
I think that's a great line. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
What about the two additions in this movie of Christian Slater and William Peterson?
I think William Peterson is terrific.
I think he's great.
I think, obviously, I mean, it's not, he's playing both a historical personage and someone who's been played by James Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he stands up to that, and he's certainly different enough from Coleman to make it work.
Yeah.
And he's, they literally pass the gauntlet at one point where he gives him the sheriff's badge, and that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I believe whatever he's putting out there into the world. His hair is distracting. We've talked about that. The beer
Right.
He looks like he loses about 200 pounds when he shaves. So I think it's fine. I mean, and Christian Slater's good, but he's giving us early 90s Christian Slater.
Well, he was the it boy then, so...
I mean, they put this kid in everything. He turns up in Star Trek at one point.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Just because he was a fan.
Yeah, but I had the same the feeling that we've talked about. It's like, and Christian Slater? And Balthazar Getty? And it's... I mean, they wouldn't know at that time that these actors would still be... working
and viable and great,
Yeah. Same with Viggo Mortensen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, doesn't he play a pretty similar role in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? Like the annoying gang member. He really nailed that persona.
Yeah.
The annoying, unreliable gang member who talks like a young Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're fine. I like I said, I like the fact that he was a racist and that they played with that a little bit, but it kind of gets lost in the mix.
Yeah, I agree.
At least
I like the character,
but
again, it's sort of this idea of you spread yourself thin and you don't have much to do with them.
Yeah, and we got a lot of characters to deal with in a very short amount of screen time. Pat Garrett kind of has the clearest storyline, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you see a
but
big
you also
character change, which is
but you give
represented by shaving,
right?
As movies do.
Yeah, but you give up that storyline by supposing that he doesn't kill him and that he lives. If you want to make that arc, if you want to make that arc the most interesting it can be, he has to kill him.
But did he let him go?
Steals his horse.
I mean, the afterword is delightful in that it looks like a more interesting movie than we've seen. But it's also like, oh, I didn't know that he was supposed to be an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, right.
I would have watched this movie very differently if you'd have told me that at the very beginning. Gives you no, except for the fact that he sounds like Grandpa Simpson. It gives you no clue that this guy is potentially talking shit.
I'll tell you, I'm on the fence now. There are so many problems with this movie, but I still contend that when I finish this movie, I think that was fun. You clearly have a different mindset. You want the last word on this?
The last word on this is, had Unforgiven not come along because the last one in this is me talking about another movie. Had Unforgiven and a bunch of actually pretty good westerns that have the same project come along or after and before this, it would have looked a lot better and a lot more progressive. As it is, it's
middling.
Low to middling.
All right. You have to undercut me at every turn, don't you?
No, I don't.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tell us what you think of Young Guns 2. We're not even sure ourselves at the end of this conversation, I think. Well,
it's definitely a good barometer.
Yeah.
For good and bad. I think it will swing back and forth along the line of good and bad.
Right. It's that idea of movie versus film, good versus bad. What the fuck is this movie? You tell us.
Yeah, I mean, how average is average? Does average mean bad? Does average mean good?
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, and find us on Instagram. Send us an email at everythingsequel@gmail.com and tell us what you think. We're interested to know, and you might find your comments read to you on air. For Tom Stewart, my name is Michael Shantz. This has been painful and wonderful. Thank you, Tom.
Hasta la vista.
Nice. Until next time, everybody.